Hi, every year, our last issue of the year is a review of the previous 12 months. And one of the features that we cover is our favourite images of the year, as well as the most prominent pictures taken during the previous 12 months. And this video is all about the images.
And there have been quite a lot of photos that have come out this year, but we're just going to start with a top roundup of the photos that won the big awards, and then we're going to go into the photos that our team picked, the AP magazine team picked, that were their favorite photos of the year. So to start off the discussion, there's this photo that won the Taylor Wessing Photo Portrait Prize, and it's titled Sonam by Steph Wilson, and it's quite a controversial photo. What were your first thoughts when you saw it?
I think, obviously, your initial thoughts are it's a trend. You know, it's designed to trigger that whole discussion about trans, which is, we know on social media just tends to go crazy. But it's quite a deceptive picture because it's not what it seems, is it?
No, it isn't, and it's described as an unconventional and imperfect example of motherhood, and that's what the series of photos is supposed to present.
The interesting thing about it is that the actual subject is actually a heterosexual cisgendered woman who, for a living, makes prosthetic facial hair and wigs and is wearing one of her fake moustaches. And just the act of effectively a naked, ordinary naked woman but wearing a moustache has, of course, completely thrown the viewer into a state of confusion as about what they're looking at.
Yeah, it's definitely a deserving photo. And if you haven't gone to see the Taylor Wessing Portrait Prize, it's on exhibition from now until the 16th of February 2025. So do visit it at the National Portrait Gallery.
The next picture we'll look at is the winner of the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition, which is one of the biggest, most prestigious competitions in the world. It's hosted by and held at the Natural History Museum in London every year. And this year's winner is an interesting choice. What do you think, Musa?
So when I first saw this picture, I thought it was a painting because that's how striking and beautiful it looks. It genuinely looks like a painting. What were your thoughts?
I thought it's an interesting picture. Tadpoles, you wouldn't expect tadpoles.
No.
I think for years and years we had tigers and snow leopards and glamorous animals, polar bears and whatever. I think what's happened in recent years is there's been a shift of the competition away from beautiful wildlife pictures of beautiful animals to being the kinds of pictures which people who are botanists and zoologists find interesting because the subjects are unusual or hard to photograph or have never been seen before. Yeah. So the last few years, people have gone, oh, when they've seen the winning picture, because it's not been the pretty animal. But I guess if you're into that sort of zoology field, this is a rare picture. Perhaps there aren't too many pictures of these tadpoles, and they're perhaps very hard to capture, which is why it's won.
Amazing. The next picture we're looking at is from the Bird Photographer of the Year, and it's titled When Worlds Collide. And this is a very interesting photo because from the first glance, you wouldn't think those are birds, would you?
You wouldn't, no. It's like a still life of something, and you're not quite sure. You know those birds in the middle because they're slightly larger?
Yeah. And you were telling me that
Well, apparently there's 4,000 dead birds in this picture that have all basically flown into windows, and it's something we don't really give much thought to, but apparently just in the America alone, more than 1.3 billion birds die as a result of colliding with windows. And there are these all voluntary organisations that go around collecting up these birds, and someone Patricia has put these into a still life to illustrate just 4,000. This is a tiny number. It's probably in a couple of hours worth of bird deaths to illustrate the problem of basically birds dying in such huge numbers.
What I love about this image is the fact that it's an image that makes you stop and look and read more about the actual issue. And, I honestly wonder how long it took them to put together this artwork, because it's not just a photo for me, it's actually a piece of art.
It is, very much so. It's a very interesting picture.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at next?
So we're going to look at a photographer who actually you admired as one of your top photographers this year. And this is Liam Mann, who won the Open Photographer of the Year at the Sony World Photography Awards with his picture titled Moonrise Sprites. What
I think is interesting about Liam Mann's work is that a lot of people use drones for taking photographs, but not many people, and I think Liam's the only one I'm aware of, that uses drones to light his subjects, not as a camera. And this picture over this very famous peak on the Isle of Skye is an example of not just a great photo, a well-lit photo, but the fact that he was to get up in the middle of the night to hike this mountain in the dark to get there so that he could create this picture at sunrise with all these drones. So that's dedication for you.
Yeah, and it took multiple shots to be able to light up each part of that feature. And there is a photo that you picked as one of your favorites from Liam as well?
I did. I picked his Angel of the North picture because I thought it was just really clever. It's nicely lit, but also I love the way that he created a halo over the angel, which was, of course, the missing bit from the Angel of the North, using the light from the drone. So I thought it was pretty clever.
Amazing. And Nigel, what's the next photo we're looking at?
Well, speaking of drones, which we just were with Liam, the next picture is the winner of the Travel Photographer of the Year competition. And it's a drone photograph of early morning over Tuscany with a really misty landscape. And it's a really pretty painterly picture.
I was thinking that it just looks like a piece of art. I could see that hanging in a gallery or in an office space or a hotel, you know. It's very cleverly taken. I love the composition and the edit, the final edit, to just make it look like a painting. It's really beautiful.
It is quite nice. And it also just illustrates how drones are becoming more and more mainstream as a means of capturing landscapes in particular.
Yeah. And talking about using, you know, different types of cameras to capture images, this photo will surprise you. It's the overall winner for the Close-Up Photographer of the Year. And this photo was captured using a GoPro.
Right, okay. What I like about this picture is that the GoPro was placed inside a tree trunk. And the photographer waited for a bird to pass across the field of view, but you've got the edges of the tree trunk creating a natural frame around the image. It's very clever. Probably required a lot of patience to wait for that moment.
Definitely. And, you know, just looking through these photos, something that I'm reminded about is how it's not about the kit you use, because we've got photos that have been taken by drones, photos that have been taken by a GoPro, winning these big awards. So ultimately, it's not the kit that, you know, makes the photo. It's your eye, it's your creativity, it's the time and patience and the skill and thinking creatively. How best do I use what I have to capture the image that, you know, I want the world to see?
And sometimes it's about being there.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the World Press Photo winner by Mohammed Salem, which is a very powerful picture of a mother in Gaza clutching her dead niece, which has been after she died, after her house was hit by an Israeli missile. This is an incredibly powerful picture, which is very well deserving of its. But to be honest, there are so many pictures like that that also could have won. I mean, it's
a very heartbreaking situation.
It is, yeah.
And now let's look at some of our personal favorites as well as the AP teams. So we'll start off with your photos that made your year.
Okay. Yeah. There are so many pictures. The ones that really stood out for me, I think I have to start with Gabriel Medina's picture at the Paris Olympics of the surfer. This picture went viral.
The most controversial photo there was this year.
So many people thought it was faked, partly because the cloud behind him looks like a ledge. It looks like someone's badly photoshopped a cloud. Yeah. Of course, anyone who watched the news or watched the Olympics on TV saw the footage of it happen, of him doing this from different angles, because the photographer was like the other side of the wave, so you couldn't see the land, but there were also pictures taken from behind him, from above, on video. So we know it wasn't faked, but all the same, it's a remarkable moment. It's just this surfer suspended in midair with his surfboard next to him. It's an incredible shot.
Yeah, talk about like freezing time. Like obviously it was a millisecond, but that being able to capture that's really amazing.
He was very lucky that he was probably in the best position, because other people, there's only the optical illusion of where he would happen to be when he took the picture that creates that idea that he's floating in space. Yeah. Whereas other photographers, perhaps in other boats or from land, saw a different view and it didn't look quite the same.
Yeah, it's a really good photo.
One of my other favourite pictures, also from the Olympics, which is perhaps a more personal favourite. It's objectively not as good a picture as the surfer, but I'm going to pick the picture of Rebecca Andrade, the Brazilian gymnast at the Olympics, with Simone Biles and Jordan Charles bowing to her. So we're big fans. More specifically, my wife is a massive fan of the women's gymnastics, so we watched everything. And Rebecca Andrade has an incredible backstory, that she grew up in a slums of favela in Brazil, and they was quite poor, and she had to walk miles and miles to her gym classes every day, escorted by her brothers for protection, because they couldn't even afford the bus fare. So we really wanted her to win a gold medal, But of course, she's competing against Simone Biles,
which is quite tough.
It's quite tough.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, we're cheering on Simone Biles as well because she also has her own sort of triumph over adversity story. So, we support her as well. But we just wanted Rebecca to win a gold medal, and we were like, "Come on!" Eventually, she gets the gold medal. But then that moment became like a cultural moment because even though obviously later Charles was obviously stripped of her medals, it was a historic moment. For a while, it was a historic moment of the first all-black female gymnast podium. But it was also, for me, it was more about that sort of sense of sportsmanship and sisterhood.
Yeah,
in that
it's a
picture.
very powerful image. And are those your only photos?
I've got one more picture because I feel that the biggest thing that's happened during the year has been Gaza, and to not recognise that, and it has been recognised in international competitions, but I also wanted to recognise it in terms of pictures. But rather than showing a picture of sort of death and destruction, of which there are many, I've chosen a picture of sort of hope and optimism and beauty of two young girls in a refugee camp in Rafah, preparing for Ramadan with this little lantern. I mean, it's actually, if you didn't even know it was in Gaza, if it could have been like a campsite, still a beautiful picture, but you've got all these tents in the background and these two young girls lit by the lanterns. I think it's just a beautifully captured moment of an incredibly sad situation.
And speaking of photos from the Gaza situation, there's a photo that Jeff Harris, who's our deputy editor, chose as well. And it's a photo of the freelance Palestinian journalist, Samar, who recently won the RPS award. And this photo is of her wearing a pot on her head as protection. And, the lengths to which she was going out to document what was happening, protecting herself with virtually the things that she could see, which is a pot, and she had to wear this blue plastic to be able to write press. It's an incredibly amazing portrait. I mean, it's not even great resolution, but just it says a lot, speaks a lot about the resilience of photojournalists who are out there in war-torn situations, trying to make sure they document these moments for history.
And it's worth noting at this point that more journalists and photojournalists have been killed in Gaza than any other conflict in sort of recorded time, for the amount of time that their conflict has been going on. So in a way, wearing press on your shirt used to be a way to mark you out as a neutral bystander and not be targeted. Now the opposite's happening and they're being deliberately targeted. So it's incredibly brave for her to go out there with a cooking pot on her head, to go out there to document what's going on.
Yeah. The next photo I'm going to talk about is one that was picked by Jessica Miller, who is our deputy online director. And it's a striking portrait of a polar bear sleeping on a little bit of ice. And I'm just going to read what Jess wrote because I think the way she describes it is really good. She says, "I was immediately drawn into the narrative and composition of this photo, and I can see why it was a very popular image when I shared it across our social platforms. Whilst the pastel colors are beautiful and the sleepy state of the polar bear conveys a sense of calm and peace, this image is a stark reminder of the challenges that these animals face in terms of habitat loss and survival." So this was won by the 59th Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award. And it's a really striking and beautiful image.
It is a lovely, peaceful image, isn't it? It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
The next image we're going to talk about is one chosen by our technical editor, Andy Westlake, and it's by Andrew Robertson, called Misty Morning. And it depicts mist rising from a river on a sunny, frosty morning. Andy says, "I love how everything comes together perfectly, from lens choice and framing to processing and cropping. The telephoto compression emphasises the repetitive, sinuous forms of the trees on the left, while the subtle coloration communicates the feeling of the golden light of morning and the coldness of the frosty grass." It's a lovely shot.
It's beautiful. Again, piece of art that I would hang in my house.
It is very
beautiful.
Yeah, it's lovely. You could put that on the wall for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to mention my favorite photo.
Why not?
And it's not just one, it's a series of photos. So these are photos by Valery Poshtarov, who is a Bulgarian photographer, and he won the portraiture category of the Sony World Photography Awards. Now, he did a series of fathers and sons holding hands. And I thought that was, I mean, of all the photos, amazing photos that won awards at the Sony World Photography Awards, that made me stop and think, because how many times do you see men holding hands? And a father and a son project, I thought that was really powerful. And he went to great lengths of getting them dressed, sometimes in their cultural outfits, sometimes in a bedroom or outside by a car, which are spaces where men tend to hang out. And it's just a really powerful story of how this bond of fathers and son. And something he even said was, sometimes it was fathers and son holding hands for the first time in years. And I thought this was a really, really powerful project. And yeah, that made my year in terms of like photos. Yeah.
I agreed, actually, when I saw that. That was my highlight from the Sony World Photography Awards. And again, I think about, I've got, my kids of my own. I don't hold their hand, not since they were small. When was
the last time?
They were kids,
Yeah.
So it is a funny thing. Men just don't. And it's quite powerful when you see it in photographs. And it's not something you give a second thought to until someone photographs it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's one of the great things about photography, because it can highlight things that you don't think about. And then when you see it in a photograph, you think, hey, that's interesting.
And speaking of photographs that make you stop and think, there is the very famous photo of Trump just having been shot at with his fist raised in the air. That made the rounds this year. Yeah,
this was the picture chosen by one of our main contributors, Damien DeMolder. And it's that iconic picture of Trump just been shot, his ears, it's got blood on his face, his ears bleeding. He's fist pumping the air, and he's got the US flag, and he's got the Secret Service people around him. It is an absolutely iconic photograph. If you were trying to stage that photograph for like a TV drama, you couldn't have staged it better. And when you consider this was all happening in real time, he was obviously the best position, because there were lots of other photographers there. But it's just that absolute moment. He nailed the absolute moment from the perfect angle. And as I say, with the flag in the background and everything as well, I think if you don't want someone to be president, the worst thing you can do is shoot him but not kill him, because that picture probably helped him win the presidency more than if he'd stayed at home that morning, the gunman,
That's true.
And not done anything.
And I want to put next to that photo a photo that was chosen by Jay Davis, who's the director of photography at Getty Images, and it's a photo from the same rally, and this time it's Trump on the floor. And, it's a very intimate photo. And he even writes that, campaign photography at its best is usually candid or surprising, but there's a degree of performance and stagecraft. But in this moment, you sort of see Trump as a human being, a normal person, vulnerable. This is like the greatest man, in realizing that they're mortal and they're crushed on the floor just as anyone would. And I thought, if you place the two photos next to each other, same place, different photographers, but, there's a whole story around that.
That's quite right. They're seconds apart, these pictures, but in terms of the message, it's complete opposite, isn't it?
Yeah.
Polar opposite, yeah.
There are so many images that have come out this year that we could talk about, and we've got photos that we will be showing. Those are photos from our photo editors, contributors, the rest of the team at AP. But I want to close with this beautiful image that Josh Waller chose. He's our online editor, and it's a photo of, it's a macro photograph of crystals of amino acids. And at first glance, you would never think that, because it, again, looks like a piece of art. But as Josh writes, this image is both dramatic and colorful, while also being full of intricate details. It's an image that stops me in my tracks as I spend time studying the detail and getting lost within the photo.
It is a lovely image. It's got beautiful colors in it, but it also just goes to show that there's beauty, even in things that are so small we can't see them with the human eye. We have to go in really, really close, but there's beauty around us. And there's a good reminder of that.
Yeah.
So we're going to show a slideshow of some of the other pictures that the rest of the team, as you said, chose, as well as picture editors that we asked them to pick their favourite picture of the year. And we're going to follow that with these pictures. But I hope you enjoyed these pictures. Do let us know what your favourite picture of the year was. Did we include it in here, or was it another one? Perhaps post a link to it in the comments.
And thank you so much for watching this video. Do remember to subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll see you guys in the next one.